Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. For those who have been following along, we've been celebrating big cats all December long. We've been talking to different scientists, explorers, and conservationists from all over the world, learning about the thing, and of course, the really important conservation work that they're doing all over the world to help protect these amazing species. Today, we've from different locations across Canada and United States. Life at a young age while growing up in Sri Lanka. She's a senior program officer for wildlife conservation at WWF, World Wildlife Fund, and her focus is on Asian species, particularly elephants, rhinos, tigers, and snow leopards. So she has extensive experience in international species conservation and worked on issues around the world in Asia, Africa, and North America. And her area of expertise includes human-wildlife conflict. So Nilanga, it is so great to have you joining us live today. We're really excited to learn a little bit more about how you got into the field and some of the work you do. And of course, we'll have lots of questions from our students when the time comes.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. How are you guys?
Let me turn their microphones on really quick.
Sure, that'd be great. I just want to say hi to everyone. Hi. Great to see your faces. And I'm excited to chat with you about tigers today. So are you guys as excited as I am? Yes? Can I see a thumbs up? Awesome. All right, let's get started. So as Joe mentioned, my name is Nilanga, and I work and live in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And I work for the World Wildlife Fund, the big panda. Are you guys familiar with the panda? Have you seen our logo in places? Any nods? Yeah, awesome. So I work for the World Wildlife Fund, and I work on Asian species that I work with, WWF teams based all across Asia, the continent of Asia, on conservation issues related to the species that they work on the ground. And I'll get into that a bit more. But yeah, that means the big ones, big, wonderful creatures like tigers, rhinos, elephants. And it's super fun. I love my job. And I love talking to you guys about it and telling you about what I do. So I actually came into conservation through a long and winding road. It wasn't that I woke up one day when I was 5 and realized this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So it was a little bit different for me. And I always knew I loved wildlife. I was very passionate about conservation. I just didn't know whether I could do something with that as a career. But over time, doing different things, I went to school, I went to university for English, actually, English literature. And then I went to get my master's in journalism. But I focused on environmental issues because that's what I was really passionate about. And eventually realized that I wanted to do something with that passion and work in conservation. So I worked at different organizations and got a lot of really good experience. And here I am actually working on conservation issues on the ground with teams in the field, hoping that my work will make a difference. So that's me in a nutshell. So now I would love to share some information with you guys about tigers and about what WWF is doing to conserve tigers in the wild. You guys ready? Ready to hear something about tigers? Awesome. So let's get started. All right. Can everybody see my screen, the presentation that I've pulled up?
It's nice and full screen. We're ready.
Wonderful. All right. So I'd like to share some information with you guys about what we're doing to double the number of wild tigers. So I mentioned the panda before. We are WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, and our mission is to protect the future of nature, as you see on this slide. We have a unique way of working globally with a number of different partners all over the world, including communities that live in many of these countries where we work. And we want to be able to meet the needs of both nature and people. That means we work on wildlife, habitat, and a number of other issues that affect wildlife, but also work on those issues in a way that also help both wildlife and people. So we work in more than 100 countries across the world. So you'll see on this map, the blue countries are where we work. So that's across, North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Australia, the Arctic. So pretty much all over the world. So if you look to your right, the big blue blob you see on the right, that is Asia. And that is where my work is concentrated. And so if you look at this slide, you will see that we think that in the last 40 years, we have lost half of the world's wildlife populations. And that is pretty significant. That means that there's a lot going on out there that is affecting wildlife. And that is why numbers of wildlife species are going down. So what are we doing to help conserve the natural world, this world that we call home? Is we work on issues related to forest conservation, ocean conservation, freshwater, wildlife, climate, and food systems. So within this, where I am is on the wildlife team here at WWF US. And that also means that I work with teams working on wildlife issues in more than 15 countries in Asia on issues related to rhinos. These guys are actually rhinos found in Asia. So this is where I'm going to ask you guys a question. Did you guys know that there are rhinos in Asia? Anybody?
I'm going to put a classroom on the spot, Mrs. Tracy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Do you know how many species of rhinos are found in Asia?
Ooh, let's put another class on the spot.
Yeah.
Mrs. Laney's group.
I'd say about one. Probably one.
Well, did you say one or two? I couldn't hear that very clearly. Two?
We've got a battle between 1 and 2 in the class.
Oh, okay. So there are actually 3 species of rhinos found in Asia. So this guy that you're seeing on the screen, this is actually a picture I took when I was in the field. This is the greater one-horned rhino, also known as the Indian rhino, and it's found in India and Nepal in Asia. And then the 2 other species, the Sumatran rhino and the Javan rhino, are found in Indonesia, on the island of Sumatra and on the island of Java. So there are 3 species, and so those are one of the species groups that I work on. Then I work on Asian elephants. This is a picture I took in my home country of Sri Lanka. This guy just walked right by us in a car, and picture was taken. He was in what is called must. This is a time when their hormones are quite high and they're sort of emitting sort of a fluid from the glands in their forehead, and they're quite smelly. So this guy walked by and he was very, very stinky, but very calm. He walked right by us and went off doing his business. And then this guy who we're going to talk about today, the tiger. This picture was taken from my first wild tiger sighting in India. This was earlier this year in May, and was taken in Corbett National Park in India, where this lovely tigress was sitting on this road just as we approached, and we sat there watching her for about a good 15 minutes until she got up and walked off into the forest. So that was a wonderful experience. She's quite large, as you can see. So tigers are actually the biggest big cat in the world. They're quite large, can weigh from 250 to 650 pounds, and they're wonderful predators. They're what is called an ambush predator. Does anyone know what an ambush predator is?
Let's put Mrs. Larmer's class in North Bay on the spot. Your microphone's on.
Yes.
Oh, please tell me, what do you think an ambush predator is?
What do you think, Mike?
Who likes to hide and then go for the attack?
Absolutely. Very good. So they like to hide and lie in wait for their prey to come by. And usually they will, surprise them as, a prey species will walk by. Could be a large bull, forest cattle, or a large deer. They will just use that element of surprise to surprise their prey, and will go attack them, usually go for their throats, and they will make their kill that way. So tigers are pretty amazing creatures, and they're found in various habitats all over the world, from rainforests to mangroves. There is a unique population of tigers found in India, in the Sundarbans landscape, which is the only coastal mangrove habitat of tiger, like a group of tigers found in the only coastal mangrove habitat in the world. So they're pretty amazing creatures. Like, they're adapted to living in various places and various conditions. So this circle you'll see is where all of the species that I just talked to you guys about are found in Asia, in that concentrated area that you see right there. But you know what? This is also where most of the world's people are found. So can you imagine that they are sharing all of that space together? So they might be encountering some problems in these situations as they're trying to live together and make a living, in a very crowded space. So as you can imagine, with a lot of pressures that they might be facing in the wild, tiger numbers over time have gone down. They have declined. And we believe that there were around 100,000 tigers at the turn of the 20th century. And then we think numbers dropped to about 3,200 by around the year 2009. So why do we think this happened? Because there are a number of threats that they face. The first I'm going to talk about is poaching. And I'd love to ask one of the classes if you know what poaching is. Can anybody explain what poaching is?
Let's go to our Florida class with Mr. Lavogue, see if someone's got a good answer for us.
Sure.
Say it loud.
Okay. Poaching is hunting of oftentimes it's endangered animals to get the resources from the animals.
Great. That's a great answer. One thing I would add is the illegal hunting of wildlife in general, or endangered species, to sort of take something from them, right? Poaching wildlife are often killed for their skin, their meat, other body parts, for various purposes, either for food or so often skin can be used, wildlife skin can be used as rugs or wall hangings and things like that. Their body parts can be used in different medicines found all over the world. So wildlife are generally illegally hunted for those various purposes. Another issue that they face, another threat, is habitat loss. So they're losing the places that they need to live in. They're losing the forests that they call home. They're losing land to development. People are coming and building things in the wildlife habitats. And so they're losing the places they need to live in. And then population isolation is what we call when tiger populations are sort of separated from other populations that they may need to meet and interbreed with. So a tiger population in a protected area that might have become somewhat of an island that is surrounded by people, and they can't get across and meet other tigers to be able to have more baby tigers. So that means that isolates those populations. And provides a lot of, leads to a lot of issues in terms of genetic diversity. So that's an issue that they face in the wild. Infrastructure. What we call infrastructure impacts would be when you build roads. A lot of roads are set to come in, particularly are being built in Asia in the next few years. So they often will be sort of built right through sensitive habitats where tigers and other wildlife live. And that means that that's going to impact their lives and their livelihoods. They could become roadkill. If a car is going down really fast down a highway, could get hit by a road, for instance. Or they could, roads always lead to other sorts of developments. People start coming into areas when there are roads available. So then more and more of their habitat could be lost that way. And another issue is human-wildlife conflict. That is usually when tigers sometimes, encounter people and where they live, and will come across livestock. Are actually found in 13 countries across Asia. So the governments of these 13 countries suddenly realized, remember that graph I showed you guys earlier, how tiger numbers had plummeted to about 3,200 by 2009. So these 13 countries realized that this was an issue, that it had become a problem, that they were losing their tigers. And tigers are really, really important symbols. They're really important animals for the ecosystem because they're at the top of the food chain where they're found. So if you lose tigers from their habitats, that means it's going to have all sorts of impacts on the other species that live in those habitats. It could have impacts to the deer populations that they feed on. The deer numbers could expand and eat themselves out of house and home. And there are a number of other issues that cascade from the fact that if tigers are gone from any particular habitat. So these 13 countries realized that this is a big issue, and they all came together in 2010 in Russia to decide what to do. What are we going to do about the situation? How are we going to address it? How are we going to bring tigers back? So they all decided to set this ambitious goal of doubling the number of tigers by the year 2022. So this ambitious goal, all of these 13 countries got behind it and decided to really put concerted efforts into conservation efforts to bring tigers back. So WWF also joined this effort, and we went on to work under the initiative called T times 2, which means doubling the number of tigers by 2022. So what that means is a lot of different things. And as part of these efforts, we engage governments to ensure that they're doing conservation efforts on the ground. We work on various issues and threats that tigers face and ensure that we're working with a lot of different stakeholders to ensure, and people on the ground, communities, governments, everyone we work with, to ensure that we're working to bring tiger numbers back. So if you guys remember, I mentioned that in 2010, we had 3,200 tigers based on the surveys that had been done for tiger numbers. Then we did another count in the year 2016. And by that time, we found that numbers had increased. And then this map also shows you where we work in the tiger range countries in Asia. You will see that we have 13 tiger landscapes, and within those landscapes, we work in 50 tiger heartlands. Heartlands are important areas where we feel like tiger numbers could be increased. So in 2016, we found that tiger numbers had likely gone up to a little bit under 4,000. So we see that some countries' numbers are going up, some countries' numbers are going down. And in a number of these countries, we know the numbers because they do periodic census surveys for tiger numbers to see how many might be out there. Then they can find out if they have increased or they have decreased. So how do we do that? So often you will see in places where tigers are found, you'll see these cool pug marks or tiger footprints that are found on the ground. they're walking around, they're leaving, different signs behind of their presence. Sometimes you'll get scratch marks on trees. Other times you'll get, scent markings that tigers leave behind to mark their territories. So these are some of the ways that you know that tigers are present. But how are we able to count numbers, tiger numbers, and see how many might potentially be out there? And we do that through camera trapping. So what a camera trap is, we set up this camera in a forested area or a wild area where tigers may be found, and you set it to take pictures based on motion detection. So if an animal goes by, flash will go off and I'll take a quick picture. And then later on we can see what was in the area, what walked by, and then we have this big database of all the tiger imagers that were captured on camera trap. And then how are we able to identify tigers is through their stripe patterns. Each tiger has a unique stripe pattern that is individual to, that individually identifies each tiger. So the stripe pattern is very similar to our fingerprints. We all have our unique fingerprints. So each tiger has a unique stripe pattern through which we can identify individuals and how many might be around in any given area. So through that, we're able to estimate numbers of tigers that might be found in different countries. So this is how we arrived at some of the numbers that we were talking about earlier. So again, going back to what we're doing to protect tigers, we try to keep governments engaged. So remember the 13 countries I mentioned earlier. So we continue to work with these countries to ensure that they're maintaining the momentum to keep tiger conservation activities going. And this is a picture from the ministerial meeting in Asia, where at the halfway mark of the T×2, so remember in 2010, they decided to double the number of tigers by 2022. So the halfway mark for that was 2016. So they all came back together again to figure out, okay, where are we right now? What are we doing to improve our efforts? And where are we going from here? So we work with governments all the time to keep tiger conservation efforts. And then we work on something called zero poaching. And zero poaching, we talked about poaching before. Poaching is the illegal hunting of wildlife. And we're trying to stop that. So how we stop that is by empowering rangers on the ground, building their capacity to do anti-poaching efforts, to prevent the illegal killing of wildlife and to protect these populations in the wild. And among our Asian countries, the country of Nepal has shown incredible leadership in being able to achieve zero poaching over a number of years. So Nepal is a leader in conservation in that in their conservation activities and efforts on the ground, the park rangers in many of these protected areas in the country work together with the Army and NGOs like WWF and the government and other stakeholders to protect tigers and other wildlife in these protected areas. And they have demonstrated through this really fun approach, which we can talk about another time, maybe if we talk about rhinos one day, that the zero poaching approach was developed through protecting their rhino populations. They have been able to achieve 5 365-day periods of zero poaching for rhinos. Remember I mentioned that the greater one-horned rhino is found in Nepal. So they put in these concerted efforts to protect rhinos and other wildlife. And so by protecting them, protecting these big flagship species, they're also protecting everything else that lives within those parks and protected areas and those habitats. So this is a quick picture of, park rangers working with the Army to protect wildlife in Nepal. And also, this gives you a quick snapshot of what different components of work go into achieving zero poaching. So you get all of these things together and you end up with a situation in a park or protected area where you have good enforcement in place and that the wildlife is protected. And also we work on the illegal wildlife trade. So when you talk about poaching and about how wildlife, different species are killed for their body parts, you see here a tiger pelt that is probably being shipped for either to someone as a rug or a wall hanging or something like that. So we also work on trade issues, building the capacity of, customs officers who are actually able to detect and confiscate these things as people are sneakily trying to ship these from one place to another. So when they're confiscated also, you can compare them, these pelts and the stripe patterns, for instance, with camera trap data, which I showed you earlier, where individuals have been identified, and try to see where these tigers may have been poached from. So if you identify a stripe pattern from one of the tigers that were caught on camera trap, you say, oh, unfortunately, sadly, this individual was killed, and this is this individual's skin that is being shipped somewhere that someone is buying for whatever purpose. So these are also other ways that we're working to reduce the illegal trade of wildlife parts. And the other thing that we're trying to do in protecting tigers is to secure their future. So for instance, if everything we're doing to protect tigers is successful, that means we're going to have more tigers, right? And more tigers, but also at the same time, we're losing some of their habitat. And also today, in many of these protected areas, they are surrounded by communities, villages. So it's like a sea of humanity around these sort of where these tigers live. So if they need to go other places, establish their own territories, they often have to move through these communities to get to other protected areas. So we want to be able to secure their future to make sure that they're not getting into conflict situations with people, or that they have safe passage to get from one protected area to another. So we work on issues like maintaining their habitats, preventing habitat loss, ensuring that they have a place to live as tiger numbers increase, and that they're going into a future where they have a home. Or we're looking at reducing the impacts of infrastructure, from roads that are being built on tigers and their habitat, and also, the impacts to other wildlife. This you can see right here is a road that's going through a key movement area that tigers and other wildlife need to cross back and forth. So you want to ensure that they're able to move safely to and from where they need to go. And also, if they're going from one protected area to another, they may encounter communities, like I mentioned before, and might find some livestock that they think would be an easy meal. So we also work to prevent these kinds of interactions, to help people protect themselves and their livestock, but also help tigers move through these areas safely, so that they're secure and they have a good, secure future to go into. And who are some of our key collaborators and partners? Communities that live with this wildlife in many of these countries where we work. They live side by side, right next to protected areas where tigers are found. So we want both the tigers and people to thrive. So they are, in essence, a key partner that we work with to further conservation efforts, just like you guys are, because you can do so much to help spread the word, get information out about the importance of tigers, making sure tiger conservation is something that your friends and family are thinking about. And how do you spread that message? Importance of wildlife and wildlife conservation. You guys play a really, really big role. So thank you so much for listening to what I shared about tigers. And here at WWF, we think that together it's possible to conserve wildlife, tigers, and everything that we live with. So much for your attention. This slide shows you a little bit about our Wild Classrooms program. And now I'm happy to take some questions.
All right. Well, Nilanga, thank you so much for that awesome presentation. And of course, a huge thank you for the work you're doing with WWF, because without that work, I think we'd see tiger numbers and other large species falling even more. So thank you for the important work that you do.
Of course.
All right. Well, let's meet some of our classrooms and get some live questions. Let's see. Let's start off with, let's go to North Bay first. Let's go to Mrs. Larmer's class. We've got some grade 5-6 students joining us. Let me turn on their microphone. How are we doing, North Bay?
We're good.
Okay, Connor, say who you are.
My name's Connor, and my question is. Hi, my name's Connor, and my question is, what's the funniest thing you've ever caught on a picture trap?
Ooh, caught on a camera trap. So this is something I've seen. The colleague of mine did this whole camera trap study, and it was actually an elephant. So elephants usually notice anything new that's in their environment. So if there are camera traps or things that are like put in their space, they'll notice it, right? If they see it, they'll usually go. They don't recognize it. They'll. So there was this really fun camera trap series that I saw that this colleague shared, where this elephant suddenly notices the camera trap sitting in her environment, and she actually hides behind a tree right by it. And then you see like she peeks from behind it very slowly, exploring, seeing what this thing is about, and then she hides back again. So all of this was caught on the camera trap with different pictures. So it was super fun. And then she looks again, and then then there was another elephant that I think someone from her family comes by and walks by it. And then she realizes there's no danger from it. Then she comes out from behind the tree, comes right up to the camera trap and starts like exploring it with her trunk. So that was, I thought, personally, it was one of the funniest, the cutest things I have seen on camera trap.
Very cool. Let's see, Mrs. Tracy's class, some grade 4 students joining us in San Jose. Let me turn their microphone on. There it is. How are we doing, grade 4s?
Good. Good.
Hi.
Bad. I'm doing terrible. Hello.
Why were you interested in doing the wildlife fund?
Always ask that question.
The wildlife work that I do? Yeah, because so thanks for your question. Since, I was a kid, I've been really, really interested in about wildlife conservation. I've always been interested in. I never thought I would be, as a kid, never thought I'd be working in conservation, wildlife conservation as a career. But that's always been a passion, and I'm really happy that I've been able to turn that passion into a career.
All right, we're going to take a quick trip to Alberta. We're going to visit Mrs. Slaney's grade 4 class, and they're joining us from Calgary. Let me turn their microphone. Oh, it's on already. How's it going, Calgary?
Hi, guys.
Hello, my name is Lucas, and how many tigers have been? My name is Lucas, and how many tigers have been killed?
No, we got it, bud.
That's a good question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you want to know how many tigers have been killed. So that's actually a difficult one to understand, because usually when tigers are poached, every part of their body is taken for something. Their bones, their meat, or body parts are used for medicinal purposes. Their skin is taken. So often there is even like nothing left behind for us to understand that there has been a tiger killed in a certain place. So often it's when those skins are being transported from place to place and you identify that, it may have come from a specific park, that that really a tiger has been killed. But you also know when you're doing your surveys, you do your census numbers, right? You might have a certain number 1 year, and 3 years later, when you're doing another survey, you might find that their numbers have gone down or gone up. Then you know whether tigers have been killed in that park or they moved away. There could be various reasons, but that's a tough one. That's a tough one to kind of figure out whether they have been killed in particular, how many have been killed in a different place, for instance. Does that help answer your question? Great.
He's nodding, so it must have helped.
Okay, awesome.
All right, North Palm Beach, Florida, with Mr. Lavogue. Your microphone's on if you guys have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Charlie.
As middle school students, how can we help the World Wildlife Fund?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So you guys can really help by spreading the word. As many people that know about wildlife and conservation, the better it is for all of us, just that, so people are aware of what the issues are, how we could be working to help these prevent any of these, threats in the future, looking at things like simple things you can do, recycling, turn off the lights in a room when you're leaving it, for instance, or also sometimes schools will do a fundraiser, for instance, and raise funds and send it to the World Wildlife Fund to do the work that we do on the ground. But I think you guys, the best thing you can do is to be good ambassadors for wildlife by learning as much as you can and sharing that information with your friends, family, and anyone that you talk to. If you're passionate about the issue, I think you could do a lot of good by sharing that information.
All right, excellent. I love that point. There's lots of things you can do, but it can be just as easy as sharing everything you learned today, because then the people you share it with will share it, and that can make a big difference. So that's such a good point. Let's see. Let's swing back to Mrs. Larmer's group in North Bay and see if they have a follow-up question.
Hi.
Hi, my name is James, and my question is, what is your educational background?
Oh, yeah. So I think I mentioned before, I went to university, and my educational background is actually in English literature. So it wasn't really science in school, but that's what I do now. So that kind of shows you that there's no one way to get to where you want to go. If you feel like you really have a passion, you might do different things in your life. You might go through different educational programs, but you might end up somewhere completely different if you're following your passion. So there really is no one way to do it. But as long as you're passionate and you're learning things and you're pushing yourself to develop new skills and learn new knowledge about that field, you could do it. I think I'm living proof of that. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. Mrs. Tracy's class, I'll turn your microphone back on.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead. Nice loud voice.
So how do you adopt the animals?
Oh, how do you adopt? So you mean through WWF? Is that like we have an adoption program that you can check out online. We have a number of different species that you can adopt, and through that adoption program, the funds go back to the work we do to save the species. So check out our website where we have a lot of information about our wildlife adoptions.
All right, and maybe
Yeah.
well, if Kate shares a link with me, I can share that with
Absolutely. We
our
can
live
do
class.
that. Kate can share a link that you could forward on to the classes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Mrs. Slaney's class, let me turn your microphone back on.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Colby, and I'm wondering how many species of tiger are in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are supposed to be 9 subspecies of tigers in the world. Okay, but 3 of them we think have gone extinct. But also today, scientists have been debating again how many subspecies there might be. And the current debate is that there are actually 2. So you have, the mainland tigers in Asia, but also the second one would be the Sumatran tiger, which is found on the island of Sumatra, Indonesia. So that debate is ongoing, but yes. Does that help answer your question? Awesome.
Perfect. And let's visit our class in Florida one more time.
Hello. I was
Hi.
wondering, what are the most serious threats, current threats to animal species in North America?
In North America, yeah, that's a great question. In general, I would say is habitat loss, development, human-wildlife conflict. I think I talked about human-wildlife conflict before, but not a lot of people realize that it's actually an issue that we all experience all over the world. It doesn't have to be in places like Asia or Africa, but look at the coyote that comes into your backyard, or fox that gets into your chicken coop and steals your hens, or a raccoon that gets into your trash can. That's human-wildlife conflict. So we may be experiencing that in our own backyards, for instance. So if you see, you know, the way habitat loss is happening all over the world, as we're encroaching more and more into wild spaces, wildlife lose the space that they need to live and the resources that they need. So they're going to come more and more into contact with people. So I think in the future, that's going to be a significant issue that we're dealing with as, you know, we're both trying to live in this, share the same space that we live in. So I think we see that quite a bit in North America as well.
All right. So to take one more question, Mrs. Forsyth's class was joining us earlier. They're from Bracebridge, Ontario, but they had to duck out for another engagement. But they did have a question about poaching. And they were wondering how well the poaching laws are enforced in places like China and India.
So anti-poaching, so tiger protection is quite serious for all of the tiger range countries. And these laws are enforced by rangers, the police, and other officials that manage these protected areas. It depends from country to country how they're enforced or how they're managed. But anti-poaching is a serious, you know, this is a serious investment from all countries going into ensuring that wildlife are protected in protected areas. So there are varying levels of, you know, actual enforcement and prosecution of these cases, but it is an important issue that I think all countries definitely are behind, and is an important issue to address in terms of tiger conservation and wildlife conservation in general.
All right, perfect. Well, first of all, classrooms, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Your questions were great as always. I shared the link in a newsletter to the WWF Wild Classroom, and I'll share it again at the end of this event because there's some really cool resources there that you can check out. And Nilanga, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. You're doing incredible work, and it's so great that you wanted to share it with us today, and we look forward to doing more Hangouts with WWF in the future.
Great. Thank you all for having me. Really fun talking to you guys.
All right.
Take care.
Let me turn their microphones on. Let's get a nice big loud goodbye and thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. We're signing off for today, but lots more of events this month coming up. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.